Here's the secret to leadership. Leadership is not a position. It's a behavior. Being in charge is a position. All right. Leadership is a behavior.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Making a Man. Today we have Mr. Rich Diviney with us and we're very excited to have him on.
Really excited to have you, Rich. Thanks for joining us. It means a lot for you to be here.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here with both of you. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. Just for the viewers, Rich is a super fascinating guest. He is a man that has lived many lives. He's a retired Navy SEAL commander, 20-plus year career that included 13 overseas deployments. And Rich didn't stop there. He also became a best-selling author. He's a nationally recognized presenter and a leadership and human potential expert. That's a lot, Rich. So if you wouldn't mind, I think we always like to start, if you could take yourself back to when you were Axel's age, 12, 13 years old. Talk to us about your journey, what led you to be here with us today.
Yeah, well, gosh, when I was Axel's age, I was 100% intent on being a Navy fighter pilot. And I have an identical twin brother. He and I were both, and that's from, even before, since ages 6 or 7, my dad was a private pilot. So he used to take us flying once in a while. We got the bug. And we figured Navy pilots, this was pre-Top Gun, by the way, but we figured Navy pilots, they land on ships. What could be more cool than that? So it was Navy all the way. Both of us ended up in college at Purdue University in an ROTC program. I got a scholarship. He ended up going a different pathway, but I learned about the Navy SEALs back in the early 90s. I didn't know what they were. And I read an article. I said, man, these guys are cool. And so for me, it was kind of like, as I went through that program, it was like, should I be a pilot? Should I be a SEAL? I ended up kind of at the end of my college career, right before I got commissioned, saying to myself, well, I know I could be a pilot, but I don't want to always wonder if I could be a SEAL. And so that's why I tried and I went, and the rest is history. My twin brother ended up being a Marine Corps pilot. He flew the Harrier for 20 years and still flies today. He flies FedEx. And so I lived vicariously through him. He lived vicariously through me. But yeah, that was in 96, and then spent 21 years in the SEAL teams, multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Obviously, things got very kinetic after 2001. But during that time, really got fascinated with performance. We got fascinated with uncertainty and how we kind of did what we did and how we processed environments, led training, commanded teams. And then when I got out of the military, decided to go into the kind of the performance realm and start writing about it. And so yeah, here we are.
That's incredible.
Wow. Yeah.
Thanks for taking us through that, and thanks for your service.
So, Mr. Rich, you created something called the 2-second rule. Could you please explain what that is?
Yes, I sure can. But first, I can't take credit for creating it. This was something that was taught to us by one of my favorite commanding officers, and it was something his grandfather taught him, and it deals with resilience. And what the 2-minute rule was he used to say, when something bad happens, take 2 minutes and kick the dirt, swear, do whatever you want, feel sorry for yourself. But after that 120 seconds, get back to work, right? And the same thing when something really good happens. When something really good happens, take 2 minutes, celebrate, rest on your laurels, congratulate yourself. But then after 120 seconds, get back to work. And it was an exercise that he wanted to convey to us in kind of practicing resilience. Resilience is really about how quickly and efficiently you bounce back. People think resilience is about getting knocked down and getting up again, right? Keep on getting up. It's like the Rocky Balboa. That's perseverance. Resilience is, if I get knocked down, get knocked off baseline, how quickly and efficiently can I get back to baseline? So in other words, you can be perseverant and not be resilient. So people who are high on perseverance and low on resilience, that's someone who's headed for burnout, because that's someone who's going to go and go and go and go and never actually, in fact, recover. And so resilience is a really interesting and important factor in how we kind of perform long term. And so the 2-minute rule allows us to practice and exercise that muscle. It's obvious that there are certain things in life that take a lot more than 2 minutes to recover from. And there's certain things in life that happen that we want to celebrate for a lot more than 2 minutes for. But the exercise that muscle on our little kind of mini tragedies, the bad day at work, bad day at school, the argument with a friend or spouse, exercise that 2-minute rule on those things, and you'll get really good at that muscle, so that when the big things happen, you're better better equipped to get back to baseline.
Yeah.
Ax, you have three sisters, and this rule could help you
Yes.
so much. Like just think of all the situations where you're like, okay, I can be frustrated for 2 minutes, but I got to get back to what I'm doing and keep my head down, right? It's also good for golf, I imagine.
Yeah.
Think of all the little mini failures you experience in a round of golf, like just to keep a cool head in any situation, right?
Yeah.
That's such a great lesson. Another lesson that was in, I think it was your first book, Rich, that we talked a little about with Axel and I, was you and your team created something called the Mind Gym.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how that evolved, and maybe how someone like Ax, who starts school tomorrow, like how can a young mind use that, the things that you learned creating that?
Yeah, the Mind Gym was a project that we endeavored upon when I took over training. I in 2005 I went to SEAL Team 6. SEAL Team 6 is one of our most elite, I should say one of our most special commands, a very specific mission. No one really knew what SEAL Team 6 was until, of course, we rescued Captain Phillips, and we got Osama bin Laden, and then the whole world knew who we were. But I went there in '05, and then I took over the training and selection process department for that command in 2010. One of the things I was working on and was asked to look at was resilience for operators. How can we do better on recovery, but also how can we perform better and faster and stronger? And it was my thought, and the few of those guys around me who agreed with me, that the next leap in our performance was not going to be physical. In other words, benching more weight and running the mile faster was not going to do much for our performance. We needed to actually unlock our brains and develop working relationships with our brains. That's where the next leap was, that we believed. And so the Mind Gym was really very much an experiment. And could we, at that time, which was around 2010, could we get together? Could we research some of the new emerging technologies that allowed for a better relationship with our brain? And so, things like float tanks and ice baths and things like that, but also just understanding the parasympathetic and sympathetic relationships that we have, or systems that we have, and the relationship that has with our own physiology and our biochemistry, how breathing affects our state and can actually help us do better in decision making, help us recover. And we practiced that, and we kind of brought in a bunch of stuff, threw it against the wall. I have to say, I don't know how far it got. One of the downsides to the military is that when you're in charge of something, you're often not in charge of it for anything any more than like 2 years. That's the longest, right? So it's not a lot of time, and if the things you start aren't picked up by the next guy, it tends not to gain any traction. So I think the program matured, at least in the sense of bringing in tools and techniques to be better physically. Again, float tanks, ice baths, red light therapy. I'm not sure where they've gone with it in the mental side, but just Ax, for your information, these are, everything about our performance starts in the head, starts in the brain. If people think Navy SEALs, think the secret to Navy SEAL training is these big, muscly, physical, athletic people, but it has nothing to do with that. In fact, some of the most elite athletes go to SEAL training and quit the first day. Everything starts in our brain, and we as human beings have to master this relationship with our thoughts and our thinking and our physiology, and at least explore it to the extent that we can if we want to actually achieve in whatever endeavor, even athletic endeavors. Athletes will tell you this too. The best athletes, the most elite athletes, they have their mind is right, and golfing is a great example. We know, and I don't golf very much. I mean, I golf maybe once a year, and it's more of a hackathon, but I do, I enjoy it. But golfing is one of those sports that we know. I mean, you can be awesome on one hole and mess it up on the next hole, and that's a mindset thing. So understanding that relationship is really important. I really urge you, as you kind of go through your pathway, to start looking into this. When I was your age, I didn't have much of a sense of it. I really started getting into it at 16, 17 years old, when I really started thinking about it and researching it. But there's no reason you can't start early.
Yeah.
It's good advice.
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Oh, wow. Best piece of advice I've ever received. That's a tough question. Let me give you some that I've received. I don't know if I could qualify as the best, but one thing I was told by one of my favorite commanding officers had to do with courage and fear and fearlessness. People think again Navy SEALs are fearless. We are not fearless. Um, Courage is literally the act of stepping into your fear. You cannot, in fact, access it. And courage is actually it's a switch in our brain. There's actually a switch in our brain that gets clicked when we step into our fear. It's known as the courage switch. That is accessible when we actually feel the physiological effects of fear. As we become afraid, our amygdala gets tickled, and we are offered two choices. We all know those choices: fight or flight. Okay, when we choose to flee, that's one specific switch that gets clicked in our brain. If we choose to fight, i.e., step into our fear, that's a specific switch. That switch is known as the courage switch. You do not have access to the courage switch if you do not have fear. And so fearlessness is dangerous because fear is nature's risk assessment tool. It's a human being's risk assessment tool. It tells us there's something here to pay attention to. There's a threat. Pay attention. I would always, and those around me who were responsible would always look for, if we found fearlessness in our ranks, we would vet it out. We would or cut it out, because fearlessness leads to complacency and arrogance and overconfidence and all that stuff. And so my one of my officers once said, Rich, beware the fearless leader, because that person's going to get you killed. That person's someone who's going to run into things without thinking, without listening to that thing in our brain saying, hey, pay attention. And so what I want you to what I want you to take away from that is pay attention to your fear. Use your fear. Don't let your fear limit you. Okay, understand that you can push through it, and you'll get rewarded for that, both neurologically and physiologically. But don't ever think fearlessness is a good thing. Fear itself is a good thing and needs to be used. So that's probably one really solid piece of advice that I lean upon a lot.
Yeah, that's great. Like
Yeah.
I never thought of that. Like
Yeah, that's good, isn't
Yeah.
it? I like that a lot. Hey, Rich, your first book was called The Attributes, and you have something that I've read. There's 25 drivers of optimal performance. I just ordered the second book, or your newest one. It's called Masters of Uncertainty: How to Turn Stress into Success. And
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading that. Is there any key concepts in there other than what you've already shared with us that you could maybe highlight, that we could take away and put into our daily actions?
Yeah, there is. I'm going to give you the most important key concept from that book. The book, and by the way, that book is kind of the book I always wanted to write. It's what I've been thinking about for years and years. Part of becoming a master of uncertainty is understanding your attributes, and so I actually kind of unconsciously wrote the attributes first, but it was almost a kind of an unconscious genius, because the attributes was such a huge subject, huge topic, that now we've been able to build an assessment tool. We have 41 attributes, more than versus just 25. So it was a really great place to start, but it's only a part of being able to master uncertainty is understanding our attributes. So just know that the both books are linked that way. But the tool I want to relay to both of you and the audience is the primary tool of the book, and this is a process that allows us to, in fact, move through uncertainty, challenge, and stress. What we have to understand about uncertainty is uncertainty at its base level is simply the state of not knowing. Okay, now that can be good or bad. It's only when it's bad, or we feel it's bad, that uncertainty is bad. And so really, when we're talking about the bad uncertainty, we're talking about the uncertainty that induces fear. Okay. And one of my good friends, he wrote the foreword to the book, is a neuroscientist out of Stanford. His name is Dr. Andrew Huberman. He has a really great podcast. But Andrew and I had been working on this for a year or more after I got out of the Navy. And he was running a fear lab. And one of the things that we hypothesized, and I believe correctly, is that fear is a combination of two factors. It's a combination of uncertainty plus anxiety. Okay, uncertainty plus anxiety equal fear, which means you can have one or the other. You don't necessarily have fear. You can be anxious but not uncertain. Okay, that's maybe you have to give a project at school next week. You know the project, you know the material, you know the students. There's no uncertainty there. You're just a little anxious about it. There's not necessarily fear there. Okay. You can be uncertain without being anxious. Well, that's you on Christmas Eve. Okay, that's every kid on Christmas Eve. All right, there's no fear there. It's when you combine the two that you get fear. The way we begin to move through this environment of fear, is we buy down one or both of those factors. You buy down uncertainty and or you buy down anxiety. Okay. Now, buying down anxiety, we can talk about separately. That's managing your autonomic arousal to the extent that you're managing your stress. You bring your frontal lobe back online, breathing techniques, visual techniques, keeping yourself in a method where your frontal lobe is engaged. We can talk about that in more detail if we want. Buying down uncertainty is really the key factor here. And this is a process that I call moving horizons. This process is designed around this idea, actually not even idea, this fact that our brains in any environment are certainty making machines. In other words, our brains are constantly trying to find certainty in our environment. We don't like uncertainty. So our brains are trying to make sense of our environment at all times. It's doing so through three primary factors. One is duration, how long this is going to last. One is pathway, what's my route in, out, or through. And one is outcome, what's the end state. Duration, pathway, outcome. If we are in absence of one or more of these, we start to feel uncertainty bubble up and then anxiety and fear. Okay, so let's just take illness as an example. Strep throat is an illness we all know. Most people in today's world don't die from strep throat because there's a cure for strep throat. There's an antibiotic you can take for strep throat. So if we get strep throat, we are only in absence of one of the three factors. We know the pathway, antibiotic, and we know the outcome. We're going to get better. What we're in absence of is duration. In other words, I don't know how long the antibiotic is going to take to work on me. It might be different for you than it is for me. So we're in absence of just one. Our anxiety, our uncertainty level is mild. Now let's take the flu. The flu is also a known illness that a lot of people suffer from, but most people in today's world, fortunately, don't die from the flu. They recover from it. However, there's no known cure for the flu. There's a lot of people who give you advice on what to do if you get the flu, but no codified thing you can take for the flu. So if we get the flu, we are now in absence of two. Okay, we're in absence of pathway. We don't know how we're going to do it, and we're in absence of duration, how long it's going to last. We do know outcome. We're going to get better, but we're in absence of two. Our anxiety, our uncertainty level is moderate. Now let's imagine that a disease shows up and we've never seen it before. It's a virus we've never seen. There's no vaccine, no cure. Some people are dying, some people are not dying, and we don't know how long this thing's going to spread across the planet. This is us in 2020 when COVID came along. We were all in the absence of duration, pathway, outcome, which is why we felt the way we did. So all this to say, moving horizons is simply a tool, and this is what all Navy SEALs use. Okay, we're masters of this. That allows us to create certainty by picking something to focus on and creating our own DPO. Okay, here's an example. In Navy SEAL training, you spend hundreds of hours running around with big heavy boats on your head. Okay, you take these things everywhere. In Hell Week, you're running. You don't move without these on your head. And I remember it was Hell Week. It was 3 a.m. We were running on the beach with these damn boats, and it'd been forever. We were all miserable. We were next to a sand berm, okay? And I remember saying to myself, you know what? I'm just going to focus on getting to the end of this sand berm. Now, what I did in that moment inadvertently is I picked a horizon and created a duration, pathway, outcome. Duration from now until end of sand berm, pathway from here to end of sand berm, and outcome end of sand berm. In doing so, I manipulated my own dopamine reward system. Now, dopamine is a chemical that gets us moving. It's a motivation chemical, very powerful. It gets us motivated and moving. If we don't have dopamine, we're not getting out of bed in the morning, okay? But by picking a goal, it creates enough dopamine to embark upon that goal, and then it gives us a reward of dopamine when we reach that goal. In doing so, it allows us to come back out and pick a new horizon, all right? And we can use this cyclical tool of moving horizons. Pick a horizon, create a DPO, execute DPO, pick a new horizon, do it again and again. And you can move through uncertainty, challenge, and stress all for as long as you need to. Now, one of the things we have to understand about these horizons is they're very subjective to both the individual and the environment, the intensity of the environment. The more intense the environment, the shorter that horizon often has to be. I remember another thing they do to you in SEAL training is they freeze you in the surf zone for hours and hours, okay? I remember being in the surf zone and saying to myself, okay, well, I'm just going to focus on counting 5 waves. That was my horizon. Sometimes my horizon was I'm going to make it to the next meal. Sometimes it was I'm going to run to the end of the sand berm. But we're constantly having to move those horizons in ways that are subjective and meaningful to us. The reason why it's important is because if we pick a horizon that's too far or too big, we will run out of dopamine before we get there and we will quit. Okay. Anytime you quit anything, it's because you've run out of dopamine. So you pick a horizon that you can get. It's just outside your comfort zone, but not too far. You move to it, and then you pick a new one, and you're changing this. This is the neurological equivalent of eating the elephant one bite at a time. Okay, but anything you look at doing, anything you embark upon, and you can do this not only in uncertainty, challenge, and stress. You can do this for any big goal that you have. Is you take it in small chunks. Okay, you say, what am I going to focus on? Move to that. Okay, now what I'm going to focus on? Move to that, and you're constantly modulating. So moving horizons is what you'll read about, is a tool you'll read about in the book, and you'll get a little bit more about it when you read. But this is a primary tool. This is what Masters of Uncertainty do. Navy SEALs, when we are in combat, when we're in training, when we're doing anything, in the most intense environments, all we're doing is we're picking what to focus on. We're moving to that. Then we're picking the next thing, and we're stepping through. Now, what this does is this mitigates our fear, because we don't have time to be afraid. And people have asked me, hey, have you ever been in environments, in your career that you were really, truly afraid? You thought you were going to die or whatever. And I answer them honestly, and not arrogantly, but I answer them honestly and say no. And the reason is because in those moments, because there were those moments, all we were doing was working the problem. We were going step by step by step by step. We had no time for fear. Interestingly enough, it was only after the fact, everything was done, all the reports were made, I was back in my hooch, I think back, and that's when the fear would bubble up. I'd be like, oh my God, that was close, right? But that's a much better time to process fear than in the moment, okay? So moving horizons is a technique that you can practice anywhere, anytime. You don't need to be in uncertainty to do it. Any of us who go to the gym, we do this all the time. We don't think about the whole workout. We chunk it into pieces. You can do this with your schoolwork. You can do this with your meetings. You can do this with any part of your day. And you can practice and exercise this muscle, because the masters of uncertainty, guys like us, we do it without thinking. As soon as the shit hits the fan, we're immediately working the problem. So that's the biggest and most important tool I'll give you. And then you can read more about it when you get the book too.
That's such good advice. I was doing that and I didn't even know it till I heard this today. Like I'm on the one of those, what is a bike like where you're doing
the assault bike. Yeah.
That thing it's just brutal and I hate it. And so I'm like, just count to like 60, and then in my head I'm like counting 60 strokes.
I'm always doing that.
Yeah, just chunk it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you do it kind of naturally, but you don't. If you focused on it, you could probably do it more. It's a great advice, really good advice. One thing I wanted to touch upon in the beginning of your explanation there, I don't know if this, I saw you being interviewed and you were talking about gazing, like as a way, I think it was to reduce some anxiety or something. And we were watching it and we're like, let's just try it right now. And we did it, and it worked. Like I'm like, I feel more relaxed right now.
Yeah, well, so this is the other piece of it. So buying down uncertainty we talked about, that's moving horizons. Buying down anxiety. So first thing we have to understand about anxiety is all fiction, okay? Because anxiety is all things that are ahead of us that haven't happened yet, okay? Past is history, future is fiction, okay? So anxiety, anything we're worried about that hasn't happened, it's all fiction. Now, the stress that comes from anxiety is very real, it's very present. And so what we have to understand is, how do we buy down that stress? That stress is simply your autonomic arousal going up, our amygdala's getting tickled. And as that happens, what's happening is our frontal lobe, our conscious decision-making part of our brain, is beginning to take a back seat to our limbic brain, our emotional center, okay? In the most extreme cases, this is called amygdala hijack or autonomic overload, where what's happened is our frontal lobe, decision-making part of our brain, has receded completely. Our limbic brain is now in the fore, and we are acting without thinking. Okay, now this comes in very handy when you're jumping out of the way of a moving train or running from the bear, but it doesn't come in handy in about 99% of all other situations where we actually want to actively engage conscious thought. So bringing down our autonomic arousal is very important in our ability to, in fact, start picking horizons, because we pick horizons with our frontal lobe. There are techniques we can do. Some of them are visual. One of the things you talked about is open gaze. Open gaze is just a soft gaze. Instead of focusing on a point, right, which is what we do in stress. We focus in on the threat. We just open and soften our gaze. That brings our autonomic arousal down. There are breathing techniques, the physiological sigh, which is really simple. Physiological sigh is basically take a nice deep breath in, top it off, and a very slow exhale out. All right. Do that 5, 6, 7 times. You will feel yourself calm down. You may feel yourself inadvertently doing this at night before you go to sleep, just automatically. You might hear your dog doing. Our pets do this, by the way. You hear our dogs do this all the time. All right. This is a physiological side. This is bringing down our autonomic arousal. So these types of techniques can help us bring down our autonomic arousal and bring our frontal lobe back online and begin allowing us to pick horizons. And one of the things you can do is you can combine them. Like one of the things you can do in a situation where you're really feeling freaked out is say, I'm going to take 5 breaths right now. That's your first horizon. Your first horizon can be 5 breaths. And then you pick another horizon once you're done with that. So you can start combining this in very unique ways that allow you to, in fact, begin effectively stepping through uncertainty, challenge, and stress.
I love this.
Yeah.
I love this stuff.
All right. So when you first started speaking in front of many people, did you get like nervous or like
This was
anything like that?
his question to me last. He's like, yeah, this guy's a Navy SEAL. Now he's presenting. I wonder if he got nervous presenting because we talk a lot about
the answer is an unequivocal yes. Okay, and the reason is because fear is subjective. Ax, it really is. I mean, listen, you can have a group of Navy SEALs in a gunfight with Al Qaeda, okay, and they can be in that moment feeling less fear than the 13-year-old you just asked to step in front of their class and give a presentation. Okay, so fear is subjective. What makes us afraid is subjective to the individual. So yes, I had not done a lot of public speaking. I was afraid, and I had to manage that. I managed my anxiety and I managed my fear in a way that allowed me to begin doing it. And then I just did it over and over again. You can actually inoculate yourself against fear if you just do that thing repetitively. I get up now in front of people. I'm not afraid anymore because I've done it enough that I've inoculated myself. But you can take almost any thing you're afraid of, and if you just do more of it and do it over and over again, your fear will begin to reduce. Now, the key is, though, once the fear is gone, you don't have access to that courage switch anymore, by the way. But it doesn't matter as much because you don't necessarily need courage anymore. So because you're used to the environment. But you can practice that and you can inoculate yourself, as I've done with public speaking. So
Yeah.
That's good. I like that. Let's end with your last question, and then we'll go from there.
Alrighty. I want to be a really good leader someday. And is there anything I should start doing now to help me get there?
yeah, what a wonderful question. Yes, I'm going to teach you the secret to leadership right now while you're young. Okay. And here's the secret to leadership. Leadership is not a position. It's a behavior. Being in charge is a position. All right. Leadership is a behavior. And the sobering news that I want you to know now, and most people don't learn until it's too late, is that we can't self-designate. We're not allowed to call ourselves leaders. That's like calling yourself good looking or funny. Okay. Other people decide whether or not you are someone they want to follow based on the way you behave. Okay. If you call yourself a leader and you look back and no one's following you, I got bad news for you. You're not, all right. So we behave in a way. When I was an officer in the SEAL teams, I was in charge of things all the time. Okay. Whether or not I was a leader was based on what people felt and thought about me and the way I behaved. So the way you become a leader is you behave like a leader, and you behave in a way that allows people to say, that is someone I want to follow. Those behaviors, of course, they're subjective as any are, but some of the common ones are accountability, right? Decisiveness, right? When you take ownership of your actions, both good and bad, people tend to say, this is someone I would follow. When you are decisive in a good way. Now, decisiveness is not about the ability to make a decision. It's the speed and efficiency with which you make decisions, right? People tend to say, this is someone I want to follow. Empathy. You show empathy. You show people you care about them. They will look at you as someone they want to follow. So there are some attributes out there that you can exercise and begin to practice. And this is what I challenge you to do, is just experiment with this. Experiment with these behaviors and see how it turns out. You're going to find that slowly, inadvertently, people are going to be like, "Oh, Axe is someone I will follow." That's someone I want to follow. But just know it's never your choice. It's all about your behaviors, and it's other people's choices. And that's the secret to leadership.
That's so good. That's such good advice. That's really good. Rich, this has been awesome. We can't thank you enough for joining us. And we'll continue to read your material and follow you and stay in touch, please. Thanks for coming on.
Well, please stay in touch with me. I love what you're doing. Let's keep in touch. And the next book, I'll get to you guys and we can do this again. But this is great. While the parent-child bond is the greatest one, the father-son bond is just as powerful. And I know because I'm there, and I'm in mourning because I have to say goodbye to my I have to kick my kid out, and he has to leave for a while. But that's you don't have to worry about that for a little while.
That's part of it too, right? Yeah.
So
well, good. Thanks, Axe. Good job today. It was great. It was a good
horrible.
job. I know it was a bad slap, but thanks a lot, Rich.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us today on Making a Man. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with others. Together, we can keep inspiring and guiding the next generation.
Thank you. See you next time.
Oh!